And welcoming Dr. Paul Maurer and our Academic Perspectives panel.
Thank you so much, and a special shout out to the AFCEA Organizing Committee, Mike Warlick and his team putting together such a fine set of speakers and panels today. As you know, the focus of this conference is building workforce through training and education. This is the education part of it. But what you'll find out very quickly is that those of us up here on the panel are doing both education and training to some degree, depending on the institution. There are 6 of us, so we know that we need to kind of dial through quickly because we want to get to your Q&A. And so the agreed-upon format for all 6 of us is that each of us would give a 3 to 5 minute either overview of the program of what we're doing, with a particular emphasis on either a distinctive or some model of innovation that we're focused on. A lot of people are doing the same things, and so we're kind of focused here on innovation and distinctives. I'll introduce each panelist individually, and then as we get down the line, I'll come back. I'll have a few seed questions, and then we'll open it up for questions from the audience. So I'll start with my 3 to 5 minute overview. We're at Montreat College, which is 3.5 hours due north of here, right outside of Asheville, North Carolina. We're in our 7th year of teaching cybersecurity. And for the most of those 7 years, we built our academic program. We built a Bachelor's of Science in Cyber. We added a minor in cyber. We decided to really reach out to the military community, and so we have an MOU with the U.S. Army here at Fort Gordon, one of a handful of schools with a formal MOU with the Army to do cyber education for the Army. So we built an associate's degree in cyber. We also added 3 15-hour certificates in cyber, and then we also wanted to be able to educate at the C-suite and tech suite level, so we rebuilt our Master's of Business Administration program and added a concentration in cybersecurity management. So we have those 5, and we have all 5 of those available 100% online. The distinctive for Montreat College is that we are a faith-based liberal arts college, not a big state university. And as a faith-based liberal arts college, we overtly teach to character and ethics. We've done so for 104 years, and we've seen no reason to stop doing that. We're also a liberal arts college, and so we teach the competencies of communication skills, of reading, of writing, how to write a one-page memo, how to work on a team, how to cooperate with other people. These are the soft skills that you've heard other speakers today talk about, and the trust factor that General Fogarty talked about earlier is embedded in this idea of teaching to character and ethics as a faith-based college. And so we're certainly not utopia. We don't do it perfectly. Our students aren't perfect, but at the same time, we attract students who come from families of moral compass. We teach moral compass, and hopefully we graduate moral compass into all of our disciplines, not just cybersecurity. Our students are required to do 2 internships prior to graduation, and they are finding a very, very easy and quite lucrative pathway into their first jobs in cybersecurity, getting 3, 4, 5, 6 job offers per student in many cases. But what we've heard along the way is that from industry, because we're very externally facing, what we've heard from industry is we love what you're doing, we love how you're doing it, and we love your students and graduates, but honestly, we're not going to send a lot of our employees to go get cyber education at Montreat College, not going to ask them to get a degree, or anywhere else for that matter. But if you had training, we need training, and we need it now, and we need it at all sorts of different levels, C-suite, tech suite, cyber frontline, IT staff, and cyber hygiene, and we'll never stop needing it. So if you did training, we would need that more than your degrees. So we said a few years ago, let's get in the training business. So we have launched this year the Carolina Cyber Center. We have a grant from the state of North Carolina, and we've hired our first executive director. He's sitting right down here. Raise your hand, Adam. Adam Bricker is our first director for the Carolina Cyber Center. He started last week, and his job is to help build the product for government, industry, and education. We're doing a public-private partnership, working with academia, or as academia working with industry and government to solve this economic and security threat of our age. And so over the next year to 2 years, we will stand up a whole new area for Monterey College in addition to the degree-granting, credit-bearing education program. I'm not sure, it's not unique, but it is distinctive, particularly in the small liberal arts space. And we look to serve the state of North Carolina. And our objective through the Carolina Cyber Center is to harden the cyber defenses for the state of North Carolina and beyond in that region. So that's a little bit of what we're doing. Let me introduce the first panelist to my right. It's Rahim Bia. Rahim wears 3 hats in his work. He is a vice president for interdisciplinary research at Georgia Tech University. He's also the executive director of their online master's program in cybersecurity, and he is also a professor in the School of Electrical and Computer Engineering. And so would you share with us a little bit about what Georgia Tech is doing in that innovative, creative space?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, thank you all for sticking around for the afternoon sessions. I know it's a little tough after lunch. I grabbed a little coffee before I hopped on stage. So, Paul, it's interesting what you guys are doing at Monterey. I think you figured out a long time ago, and I think the rest of us are just catching up, that especially in AI and security, we have to focus on the moral compass and ethics. And that's not something that I think our community has focused on for a while, and we're now starting to look at it. So it's normal for you guys, but I think it's new for us. I think that's a good thing. So at Georgia Tech, we have, you can think about 2 different pathways. So we have our professional education, and that's for folks that are just kind of retooling. So people that want to come in and do a week boot camp, or even have us come to them. But in our GTPE, Georgia Tech Professional Education unit, we have over 21 courses that are cyber security related, and we've been doing this for a really long time. And a lot of, almost all the folks that are teaching those courses are practitioners. So I've heard the SANS founder earlier talking about that, and I think that's certainly important in areas that are very applied, and that's something that we offer at Tech. The other pathway, if you will, when it comes to education, is our masters in cyber masters programs. So we have 3 different programs that are online. So the MS in cybersecurity, which is the one I run, has about 650 students. It started about a year ago. The online masters, or OMS in analytics, which started about 3 years ago, has about 3,500 students. The online masters in computer science, which was the first one that we started about 6 years ago, has 10,000 students. So it's yes, that's right. Yeah, I do the same thing every time I repeat those numbers, right? So it is massive. What's interesting about what we do is that we're taking the output of OMSCS, which is all these data points, and studying that. That's our first program, and putting that back into the online masters in analytics and cybersecurity. We've had studies done on our programs, and one thing we wanted to make sure that we were not doing was cannibalizing, because we all are here because we need to grow the pool, not to cannibalize. And actually, the study that was done on our online masters in computer science program by Harvard essentially showed that we grew the number of master's recipients by about 20%, and that we actually didn't shrink it. Another interesting data point is that most of our students, the average age is about 35 or 36. So it's completely online, and the average age is, folks that are working and have families. Another nice data point to share is these programs range from $8,000 to $10,000 for the entire degree program. When we announced the online masters in cybersecurity about a year ago for under $10,000, we got emails from people saying, "Hey, I just completed on campus. Can I get a $30,000 refund?" So I forwarded those to
no,
I sent it to our PR people and said, "You guys can handle that," right? So really interesting. Another piece I'll say that's innovative about what we do at Tech is the online program is exactly the same program as what's offered on campus. So it's taught by the same faculty that teach on campus. So right now I'm actually teaching a cyber physical system security class. So I teach industrial control security, how to attack in power grid and water treatment plants, things like that. Our faculty are very innovative. Most actually have, well, not most, but a lot have startup companies. So they will know what's going on in the field and actually bring that back into the class. And one example I'll tell you that's sort of self-serving is that, in my CPS security class, I was looking for a really large virtual test bed for my students. We couldn't find one. I could not find one that was reasonable and that was cheap. So we built one. I had a master's student actually build one. So we built it and we actually put it out as open source for other folks to use. So we're very innovative in our classes and essentially in almost everything we do at Tech.
Thank you. That's fascinating. Our next panelist is Kent Malowitz. Kent is the president of UMBC Training Centers, UMBC's nonprofit workforce development enterprise. Under Kent's leadership, the training centers have become a world-class provider of professional and technical training to the federal government, businesses, and individuals seeking new careers and professional development. This is a spin-off, and Ken will tell you about that, a spin-off of the university itself. Ken?
Thank you. UMBC is the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and in Maryland, right outside of Fort Meade. NSA is our very good partner, and because of our proximity, we've always enjoyed a great partnership with them. Lots of faculty going back and forth. They hire many of our students. UMBC is 60% of our undergraduate and graduate students are in STEM fields, so it's a very STEM-oriented place. Our most successful sports team has been our chess team year after year. We've competed in cyber, and we won one really big basketball game, if anyone saw that 2 years ago. So, and our president, who's a mathematician, always said, why sports? And then we won that game, and he totally got why sports. So that program's taking off. So UMBC Training Centers is a spinoff. In 2000, President Rabowski, who's still our president, thought to ask the question, what if we did something totally different? What if we weren't encumbered by the bureaucracy of the state or the academy itself? How do we innovate on what we do, extend what we do, and do well in computer science and information systems and other fields to people that are not in college or that already went to college? Why are research universities not participating in lifelong learning unless you want to come back and get a master's degree? So they started UMBC Training Centers. Terrible timing because it was all based on IT training, and in 2000 the dot-com bubble had burst, but out of those ashes has risen I think a much more strategic organization than they could have even thought back then. We've taken the values of the academy from a quality academic rigor perspective, but been able to have that exist within a nimble platform of a nonprofit and operate more like a business. How do we work with industry to make sure that we are teaching concepts and practical content that is relevant to them today? About 80% of what we do is training incumbent workers on professional development, so upskilling those folks who are already doing cyber, IT, data science, cloud computing, these types of things, which puts us in a very good position to know what specific skill sets are needed for the people that want to get into these fields but may not have the resources to go back and get degrees. So 20% of what we do is working with transitioning military, career changers, and increasingly career starters who are just opting not to go to college. Or if they do go to college, they would prefer for their employer to help pay for their college. So we're really there to help get them into these fields, get the certifications, get the training, and like I said, hopefully get the job to be able to then move on to get your degree. Obviously, we're a university. We think degrees are valuable. However, we know that there are many, many jobs in IT, and I think even more than we account for that do not require a degree, at least to get started. So,
excellent. Thank you, Ken. Next to Ken is Alex Schwartzman, who is the Dean and Professor at the School of Computer and Computer Sciences at Augusta University. He is the Dean of Augusta University's School of Computer and Computing Sciences. He is nationally known for his work on security and integrity of electronic voting systems, distributed computing, and fault-tolerant systems. He chaired and served the program committees of more than 50 leading conferences and has served as a steering committee chair of both leading international conferences on distributed algorithms. Dr. Schwartzman?
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and my commute here was especially difficult about 200 yards from here, where my office is at the Georgia Cyber Center. Augusta University is a university with a close to a 200-year history, but it was reborn as the fourth research university in Georgia as a consolidated university just a few years ago. Previously, in STEM areas, in computing in particular, we were only an undergraduate institution. But in recent years, we are becoming, in particular my school is becoming a comprehensive research and education college, and we're paying as much attention to undergraduate education and to our growing graduate programs. A few words about our undergraduate programs. One of our focal areas is, of course, cybersecurity, and we're offering 5 undergraduate majors. On one hand, a standard computer science program. On top of that, we're building a cyber operations bachelor's program. At the applications extreme, we have a Bachelor of Science in Information Technology, and building on that, we have cybersecurity bachelor's degree. And our latest program, undergraduate program, introduced this academic year, is a cybersecurity engineering program. And we're especially proud of this program because I think that these days people are paying too much attention to software level security, and they forget that one needs to consider the entire vertical stack of the systems that they're using. And if we are focusing just on software and ignore the networks and hardware, underlying hardware issues, this could lead only to a false sense of security. We all know that most low-level components are manufactured not in this country, but somewhere in the Far East, and the supply chain is a big problem. It reminds me of the movie. I think it's called Armageddon, where an asteroid is threatening to destroy the planet Earth. And there are Russians and the Americans, and they're trying to start their spaceship engine, and it doesn't start. And so the Russian guy starts pounding on the equipment, and the Americans say, "What are you doing? These are complicated American components." And the Russian guy says, "American components, Russian components, all made in Taiwan." So the supply chain is extremely important, and we know cases where there are components which are maliciously manufactured, and sometimes they're manufactured simply shoddily. As you can buy a $10 Rolex in Manhattan, and you can buy an Intel component that is a fake. So this is one of the reasons why our cybersecurity engineering program, we believe, is important, because it will produce a professional who understands the entire vertical stack. There are other reasons as well, but I won't talk about that. So graduate education. Currently, we offer a master's degree in information security management, and it is designed for a working professional or for people who are trying to change their orientation. And I want to point out that according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, there are about 20,000 entry-level jobs that require at least a master's degree. Now, this is a growing phenomenon, and just imagine if there were 200 universities in this country producing masters in computing disciplines, that would require that they each graduate 100 master students, and that's just an impossible task. It will take many years to close this gap. So we are growing our undergraduate graduate programs. We have just been approved to offer a research thesis-based master's degree that we will start next year, and we will continue growing our programs by starting a PhD program on the heels of that. Now, when we're talking about workforce development, we have to also realize that nationally there is a shortage of professionals, research and faculty who can educate the next generation of security professionals, computer science professionals. And so we are not producing enough PhDs in this country who are willing to work in the education landscape. And that problem is in part because of the industry is doing so well. And so a domestically educated student earning bachelor's degree has very little incentive to pursue an advanced degree. And I believe that is an issue. And the result of this is that in computer science, more than 60% of all doctoral students in computer science are international. And it has certain issues. One of them is that we're educating students, and many of them return home, and so we have educated some people, and we're losing them, and there are some other issues. So let me stop here, and that's the overview.
Thank you so much. Next to Alex is Dr. Edward Sobieski. He is a senior civilian faculty member in the Army Cyber Institute at West Point and is a professor of computer and cyber science in the Department of Electrical Engineering and Computer Science, also at West Point. Dr. Sobieski spent 28 years in the U.S. Army, retiring as a colonel. He has over 2 decades of experience as an educator, leader, and practitioner in the cyber world. Ed?
Thank you, and very honored to be a member of this panel and to be a part of this event. For my 5 minutes, I feel like if we're going to talk about education, I'm failing you if I don't kind of look out 5 to 10 years at least and just ask a few questions and make sure that we're not stovepiping too much or siloing too much in just the area called cyber. So for what it's worth, one of the questions I would ask is, what do you think the content for certs will be like when General Fogarty is commanding Information Warfare Command as opposed to Cyber Command? You would think it's got to change. It's going to have to evolve, and I think we got a preview of that today. But, you know, the convergence of cyber with IW and EW, but then what about the increased weaponization of social media, and the will robots and drones start fitting into the cyber realm, at least defending them? So something to think about. Another thing that crosses my mind as I've been hearing our discussions is what kind of major is best? So often here during this time I hear people just talk about a cyber major and we just sort of leave it hanging there. But I mean, at West Point we do have a cyber major that's just been stood up, but a lot of my friends who are in the cyber force stand by computer science, and then being an old IT guy myself, I think IT's been doing cybersecurity right from the get-go. So I would say that we should be careful not to just assume we probably need them all, but I think that we maybe too quickly just say cyber majors. And then I have working for me 4 lawyers and 2 political scientists and a historian in addition to that. So lots to unpack there. Chief of Staff of the Army spoke at West Point last week, and he talked about how the Army needs to transition into an information age from an industrial age Army, in which case then I come back to our what kind of majors do we need, and immediately I start thinking about, well, maybe data science and AI. So, and I'm not maybe hearing as much talk of that as I would like to. And I'm not just talking about securing it. We absolutely have to think about attacks that could be done on our AI systems. But I'm thinking about 10, 20 years from now, I would hope everybody will be using it. So what are we doing right now to prepare our students and our graduates for that sort of world? CSA said we're also in a war for talent. And I think he was, if I quote him correctly, he said, I want to retain 80% of the top 50%, which means that he's willing, I guess, to have 20% of the bottom 50%. And there was a great question asked last hour, how do we identify the talent? And I tell you, I've seen us use GPA, I've seen us use holistic evaluation, I've seen us use performance on capture the flag competitions, I've seen us use patience and drive, but I think it's something that we should have further debates on. And then winding down, I just want to point out that we need to also think about things like human-machine teaming. I absolutely agree with General Fogarty when he said that there will be elements that humans just can't be replaced for an indefinite amount of time. But I really do think that there are going to be tasks, and they're going to be much more nuanced and complicated than we believe, where human-machine teaming is going to beat humans alone. And how do we develop people that embrace and optimize those sort of situations and are looking for them? Because I guarantee you that our adversaries and competitors are. Finally, for emerging technologies, I just got to do a shout-out for quantum. And you might be saying it's a cyber conference, Ed. Well, this comes back to what is cyber. You know, and I know a lot of people will hear quantum, and they'll say, oh, Ed's one of those left-field nuts who thinks quantum computing is 5 years out. That's not what I'm saying. Quantum computing may never happen for all I know. But if you're not familiar with quantum, I just want to point out to you that there is quantum cryptography that's very realistic, quantum communications, there's a possibility of quantum computing, quantum radar, quantum sensing, quantum imaging, quantum meteorology, and quantum navigation. And all of these things China is spending very purposely on to develop and to be ready to use in the next 5 to 15 years, if not now. So I will end there, but apologize if I'm a little intense in this. Just want to kind of throw it out, shake it up a little bit, and
Thanks, Ed. Next to Ed, and our final panelist down at the far end is Dwayne Williams. He's Deputy Commandant of the U.S. Army Signal School here at the Cyber Center of Excellence. He was active duty U.S. Signal Corps officer for 26 years, finishing his active military career as a colonel. He oversees the development and execution of Army officer, warrant officer, and enlisted training and education. Dwayne?
So thank you very much for giving us in the Signal School an opportunity to tell you the initiatives that we have and how we're shaping our workforce for the future. And Ed, I appreciate your comments because we in the Signal School believe that cybersecurity starts when the first soldier steps off the bus into our schoolhouse. Training for cybersecurity starts day one, and I'll talk about a few things that we're doing to shape that workforce from the very beginning. The other thing I'll say is that our school is a little bit different because we really have 2 semesters with our force. The first semester they come is usually a basic set of instructions, which usually lasts for about, on average, about 16 weeks. And then we get them back for a second semester, but that second semester is anywhere from 4 to 6 years later. And so we've got to figure out how do we provide a foundation that allows a soldier to leave our institution, to go out and continue to seek his or her own development, and then come back and we shape what they're going to get at an advanced level, and then go back out as a final institutional type training that they're going to get from the Signal School. And so there are a couple of initiatives that we've embarked upon over the last 2 or 3 years to try to help shape that workforce starting from day one. And so for our enlisted soldiers, we have 17 military occupational skills today. We've taken a look at that and reshaping that and focusing on bringing that to 7 MOSs, but really giving the soldiers an opportunity to, so when they leave, they have a breadth of knowledge that can reach across each other's areas. We found ourselves being very specialized in certain areas, and one was not able to do what the other was able to do in a certain skill. And to be successful at cybersecurity, soldiers needed to know, have a breadth of knowledge of what was out there and how they were going to tackle the tough problems that they were faced in the operational units. And so that's a 3-year process that we're going through now. And many of our soldiers that are leaving here now are already being shaped for the future capabilities that we'll have within our formations. The next thing we did, so about 7 years ago, we built a warrant officer MOS occupational skill to get after cybersecurity, our information protection technician, 255 Sierra. And we've assessed that MOS from a base of other warrant officers, our 255 Sierras and 255 Alphas. What we found is that we weren't assessing them and getting them out to the force fast enough, and so we are now in the middle of a pilot, which will now assess a warrant officer at the W1 level. We're piloting our warrant officer basic course now for an information protection technician. Again, that's semester 1, and that technician will come back to our course 4 to 5 years later for semester 2. The next thing we did about 7 years ago is we built a cyber network defender military occupational skills, but we put many other functions into that MOS, one of which was communication security. And we've since removed all those functions, communication security being one, to allow us the opportunity to focus that MOS on just those fundamentals of cybersecurity. And going back to the semester, they're only with us for one semester. So we won't get an opportunity to have them come back and do any additional training. So we've got 14 weeks to get a soldier from being assessed, coming to training, and then leaving as a cyber network defender. The other area where we were challenged is with our civilian workforce, and bringing in civilians and having them continue to be developed over time. And so what we've done is open up our courses on a as available basis to civilians to come and sit in a course or portions of a course. And many of them have taken advantage of those technician courses, the warrant officer courses, where they come and sit through a week, 2-3 week modules at a time. And that's been successful in helping to develop the civilian workforce who won't get an opportunity to go back to training, but will have to do that on their own. The other initiative is to expand the campus beyond Fort Gordon. And so many of you are familiar with what we used to call signal universities. We now call them regional signal training sites. There are 11 of those sites that exist today. And we offer cyber network defender training, IT training, at those 11 different locations, most of which are co-located at our division and corps headquarters. That gives us an opportunity to continue to develop a soldier outside of the institution in the workplace where they are. And we can tailor that training based on the requirements of the soldier within their formations at that location. The other two areas where we've been able to take advantage of our cyber training, cybersecurity training, is at our Army National Guard sites, our regional training sites, our regional training institutes, and also our high-tech facilities with the Army Reserve. And so taking advantage of every opportunity to expand our courses beyond Fort Gordon to give soldiers an opportunity to continue to develop in the areas of cybersecurity. And then the last thing I'll talk about is we found that, we get soldiers 9 weeks out of high school. And many of them did not sign up to become signaleers, but they got it. And so we've got to level set them somehow so that they all have at least a basic fundamental, so that every signal soldier that's leaving Fort Gordon has a basic set of training and tasks that they can perform. And so every soldier that comes here goes through the first 4 weeks of what we call a foundational training. It's IT-based with a network security at the end, followed by an integrated tactical operations where we basically set out a bunch of equipment, and soldiers got to put a network together and provide the security for that network. That's the first 4 weeks of their training, no matter what MOS they are. And that helps to level set all of our soldiers as they go off to their different training for their particular MOS. And so those are the things that we have right now and the things that we're working on within the Signal School to help develop our workforce throughout the entire Signal Regiment. So thank you.
Thank you, Dwayne. If you've not emailed in your question, the email address is on the screen. Feel free to email that in. I've got a few questions to start with, and then we'll pick up the questions from there. My first question stays down here with our friends from the U.S. Army, and it's a twofold question, both Dwayne and Ed, for the two of you. One is, how can academia more effectively partner with the U.S. Army or the military broadly to help achieve the military's objectives? That's one. And secondly is, there are about 250,000 men and women who are leaving active duty on an annual basis, and some percentage of them could end up in cyber or technology careers, but perhaps are not, because the baton handoff between the military and academia is not very clean or well-oiled machine kind of handoff. And wondered if, and it's from my standpoint, it seems to me the fastest way to address the workforce delta in cybersecurity is through those transitioning warfighters coming out of the military, just because of the volume and because of the DNA combination. So I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on how to build a better machine for that baton handoff? So those two questions, either of you.
So I'll take the first one and talk about our workforce that we have within the institution to train. And so we get cadre directly from the operational force from the field. We assume that as they come, they have all the necessary skills to stand on the platform and teach. And many of them do. But many of them would need to continue to develop and build on what they've learned over the past 6, 7, 8, 10 years. And so where academia can help is providing opportunities where soldiers, instructors that I'm talking about now, can take classes in cybersecurity, network operations, whatever field, whatever area they're in. But that would have to be over a period of time. It may not conform to the standard semester hours. And it would have to, would be flexible enough to move as soldiers move. That's one of our biggest challenges, getting and sustaining a workforce who has all the skill sets that they need to meet the challenges of change inside our classrooms. Because we can change the curriculum. It's getting the cadre in place who can teach the changes to the curriculum.
I'll just give a quick short answer, but first of all, I would like to thank everybody both in the audience and to the left, I think, for the way that veterans are being treated. I think while we've still got a long way to go, I think a lot of people very much welcome veterans back into society, and I think there's a lot of people, including the people up here, who are dedicated to trying to help veterans assimilate into a profession, especially that. The two comments I would make, and this is just off the top of my head, is one, I think in the Army, one of the challenges when it comes to partnering with academia is that I think that many of the best leaders in the Army have a bias towards action and towards doing things themselves. And I think one of the key aspects to academia is you spend a very significant chunk of time first studying what others are doing. And I know that up at the Army Cyber Institute, we've got some of the best officers in the Army, and one of their first inclinations is to go into a room, shut the door with a whiteboard, and to map out how they're going to solve it, as compared to perhaps, spending a month reading thousands of pages to see what has already been done to probably solve the issue. And I say that with all love and with all respect. The second thing I would just say that I think needs to be further discussed is the role of contracted support, whether it be in teaching and training the Army or whether it be in providing services. Coming from outside the cyber force several years ago, I was very surprised at how critical a role contracting plays within our cyber force. And so I think that when it comes to partnering with academia, I feel like there's something that needs to be looked at when it comes to the intersection of contracting with the cyber force and then academia with the cyber force. But I'm not quite positive what it is.
Thank you. My next question, Alex, is for you, and this really has almost nothing to do with workforce development, but I think it'd be really interesting anyway. You're an expert in voting technology, and this is a really, really big deal. And I'm wondering if you can just offer a quick version from your standpoint of where we are in terms of the integrity of our voting systems, particularly at the federal level, and then also is there a concerted effort to attack voting systems at the state and local level?
So, first of all, it's important to understand that the elections belong to the states, not to the federal government. And so the federal government, has a limited ability to impose standards, for example. So there are no federal standards. On one hand, it is actually a good idea because having 50 different election system configurations are much more difficult to crack than a single unified system. I cannot paint a rosy picture for where we are today because many states took advantage about 10 years ago of the HAVA Act, Help America Vote Act, and they purchased equipment thinking that, how difficult would it be to add 1 + 1? And it turns out it's trickier than it appears. And there are very few states in the country I would say less than 15, that have established partnerships with, for example, independent academic laboratories to provide oversight. I spent previous 10 years working in Connecticut on exactly that issue, and I'm actually happy to report that last month we have signed a partnership agreement with the Georgia Secretary of the State, and Augusta University is going to be working with the state to increase the integrity and security of our electronic collection systems. So we're moving in the right direction. But overall, I do not think we can rest on any sort of laurels nationally.
Can we get you to come to North Carolina?
Across, well, South Carolina may be across the river, but yeah. No, this is my second year in Georgia, and I just love it.
Thank you. Kent, you've described a nearly 2 decades-long initiative and project. I'm curious if you could share with us some version of the vision from here forward and what we might learn, those of us that are kind of starting and standing up in this room, training in addition to academia, any advice that you would give us?
Yeah, no, thank you. So this year we will have trained 10,000 people, and all of it is classroom-based, by the way. Like, we are not online. We are here. We're out in the field. We're at NSA sites all around the world. We're supporting the businesses, the federal agencies. As far as, so we're at a place that I didn't think we would be in. I don't think we thought we would be in. We're a government contractor. We have competed. One of the question of how does academia help the military? I would say compete for their business. No one invests in the development of people like the military does. And so if you're going to be in training, it took me a while to figure it out, but come to the Department of Defense, and they invest well in their people. So that's a bit of advice, to compete with us and others, and learn how they do things. So the reason why we are where we are, I mentioned we're close to NSA and Fort Meade. In 2007, a group of soldiers came over to our facility and walked in the door, and they didn't give us their cards or tell us who they were, but they said, we need to do cybersecurity, and we don't have people that are joining the Army to do cybersecurity at this point. Can you create a program that in 6 months gives them the foundational understanding and capability of what they need to be able to do to get into this field as analysts and operators? And without hesitating, we said, absolutely we can, and we responded. And that was the beauty of having the platform that we had. We didn't have to go ask for permission. We didn't have to vote on it. We didn't have to research it. We pulled together content that was already available. We piloted it. We adjusted it as we got feedback and what's working, what's not. And 13 years later, we're still doing the same types of things. So I think the vision is just keep doing what we're doing. We grew 60% last year based on some contracts that we won. I've told my board of directors in the university, please do not expect 60% growth. If we can do what we did in 2019 and 2020, it'll be happy with that. So I think we're going to just continue to plug along, keep our fingers on the pulse with industry by working with organizations. We're trying to figure out what emerging technologies to invest in, and cyber and quantum and AI and so forth. But it's really just, I think we've got a good recipe of being connected and being at the table, and having brought higher ed to the table in a different way and back into the training industry. So I'm glad to see others doing it, because I think your university should be a place that you go once you complete your degree, or even if you didn't get a degree, to continue to learn. So
great, thank you.
Yep.
Raheem, your description of what you're doing at Georgia Tech is incredibly impressive, and the scale at which you're doing it is also incredibly impressive. I'm wondering whether you're willing, at liberty, to share with this group kind of what's next in terms of innovation, some kind of big thing that you're working on or hope to achieve, and if you can tie it to future workforce development, all the better.
Yeah, so I was hoping you'd ask that question. So at Tech, we are, I'll give you our general philosophy. So we believe that everyone should be lifelong learners, right? So we don't want you to ever leave Georgia Tech. If you start, we want you to stay forever. I mean, think about the Academy as a service, right? So you got $9.99 and probably a little bit more than that. But you have a monthly fee, and you are going back and retooling forever. You know, quantum is, people are talking about that now. People are talking about industrial security, AI, but that's now, that will come. It'll be commoditized, and it'll be the next thing. And we all will need to continue to train. So we would like to keep folks in forever is our highest priority. Another thing that we're doing, I mentioned we have these 3 programs, right? So a computer science program that's online completely, analytics program that's also online, and also cybersecurity. So just think about all these courses in different buckets and just throwing them up in the air. And now you got all these courses to choose from. And think about, I have a mission that's coming up in 9 months. I really only need maybe the cyber physical system security course and the deep learning course. I need that for this mission, right? I would love to be able to do something like that. So allow students to take courses across programs, perhaps for certificates as needed, and then make sure that they're stackable at some point. So that's where we're going.
We have time for questions from the audience. What questions do we have?
So we have received some. The first one is, we always talk about the technical pathway to cybersecurity education. What should we tell students who want to be involved in the non-technical side of the cybersecurity workforce?
So I'll dive in just a little bit. I hate talking back to back, but I'll do it. I would start with telling them that you need to understand some of the technology, right? So for our MS cybersecurity degree, we have 3 different specializations. One is for cyber physical systems, the other is InfoSec, and the third is policy. Now, our policy students take the exact same Intro to Information Security course that our InfoSec students do. It is brutal. It's brutal for everybody. But once you get through that, the vast majority of that is policy. And if you don't understand some of the fundamental nuts and bolts of the math, and actually not even the math, it's not even a big deal, but of the protocols and algorithms, then it's going to be very difficult to write realistic policies around those.
Anyone else want to take a crack at that?
Just having several people who I work with, who actually technically work for me, who are political scientists, historians, mathematicians, lawyers, and things like that. Part of it, I would tell them, is to choose carefully where you go to study. If you have the ability to fall in on some of the niches, like for political science, one of the ones that comes to mind is the Columbia SIPA program that has a lot of people associated with it, even though they're spread across. So kind of figure out where those niches are that the cutting edge is for law or for political science, or even for something like for quantum cryptography. Do your homework. And I think that there is absolutely going to be a need for cyber in every single discipline. And so if you have an interest in mechanical engineering and its intersection with cyber, there will be a need for you. Marketing and cyber, absolutely. So just look for it, do your legwork, and find it. And we need you. Tell them we need them.
I'll add just a comment. We all know that the weakest link in cybersecurity is the human being. And so I believe that there are quite a few areas which are non-technologically intensive, but nevertheless can contribute to our understanding. How do we build a secure cyber enterprise? Here at Augusta University, we're actually starting to talk to Department of Psychology and try to team up in the area of, let's bring together people who understand human behavior and people who understand machine behavior, and perhaps raise our overall level of understanding of how does a secure enterprise work to a new height.
Thank you. Next question.
So this one is also not directed at a particular panelist. Today, a standard U.S. government labor category requires a minimum number of years and experience, not unlike industry. how can we work together in a government industry academia partnership to expand internships opportunity like the UMBC NSA partnership? What other programs are out there?
One thing I'll mention along those lines, so we've had our cyber programs, the same ones that we delivered to active duty military in 2007. We thought, well, they work, they train soldiers to have the capabilities, let's put it out for the public. Because there's people that are unemployed and underemployed in Maryland. There's all these jobs open. We know how to provide the technical skills, and we had it approved as an apprenticeship program because that's getting a lot of attention these days. We had ACE credits approved. We have GI Bill and credentialing assistance. All these things, the challenge is still the bias towards the degree. So the beauty of the Army program, it worked because they had jobs and they had opportunities to get their hands on outside of the classroom on machines. The challenge that we face with the apprenticeships is there's not as many entry-level opportunities that don't already require a computer science degree. So that's a challenge that in Maryland we are always talking about. The state, can we lower the or change the requirements that don't require degrees? Can we really look hard at those, at the postings? There's just a reflex to just put computer science degree on these that absolutely do not need it. It makes sense while they were there. That was the way that we had prepared in the past. That's how the people that are hiring in many cases prepared for it. And we're hopeful that we can rapidly change that. And we've seen all kinds of pilots and so forth, but they're still not yet at scale. They're not bringing enough people into the industry through non-traditional pathways at scale quite yet. So,
I think my perspective on this question is that unless there's something really radical that happens in the marketplace on this question, this will change, but like most things, it will take time. It will be a very gradual change as more and more universities get into training, as more and more walls break down. There's this concept now between we've traditionally been talking about blue collar and white collar, and now there's this concept of new collar in this new economy. And so I think as those concepts become better known, and as the need for four-year degrees becomes known as not being necessary for an awful lot of the jobs, but something in between high school and a four-year degree, I do think this will happen. But I don't see anything that's going to today. I don't see anything that's going to accelerate that process.
It would be a great nonprofit, though, if anybody has got somebody who's willing to do an endowment to set up like a CyberNow website with 1-800 number that constantly is tracking the opportunities and places and things, because there's so many things happening, and it's just a lack of awareness in many cases.
We have time for one final question, and that is, what is your assessment of the state of play of public secondary school STEM education?
Anybody?
I can say a few words about that. So, first, let me give you my snobby answer, and that is, I actually prefer to see a freshman who had no exposure to computing in high school, because they don't have any bad habits that I have to unteach them, and I'm sort of serious about this. But it is also, there is a corollary to this, and that is, it is important to increase the level of awareness among high school teachers of what is something that is good and helpful that they can teach our high schoolers. So we are in Georgia here. There is the so-called Endorsement, and that's a 3-course educational sequence for high school teachers that enables them to educate high schoolers in computing. We have developed, together with the College of Ed here at Augusta University, this 3-course sequence that was accepted by the state as education towards the endorsement. And we are going to, we're actually looking right now for somebody who can help us teach it. Also, I think that the high school population, it's important to address it because we here in Augusta, we have no shortage of high school students seeking admission to our programs. But a substantial proportion of these students are here for reasons other than real reasons. Maybe they watch too much TV, play too many games, and they think it's all fun and entertainment. It's not. The programs are rigorous. And so every fall, I have students almost crying at my doorstep saying, I hate computer science. Well, we have to help high schoolers make decision to pursue cyber computing, information technology degrees based on a reasonable decision and an educated decision. So it's important to address the high school landscape for these reasons.
I'd offer two comments. They're very different from each other. One is, I would agree, Alex, with you that we don't need students coming in with computer science background into our program, and some of our best students coming out of our Bachelor's of Science in Cyber come in with no computer science background at all. We teach them the basics. Year one, they're ripping apart computers and rebuilding them. We're teaching them hardware, and then from there we go to software, and we teach them security systems after that. So there's a pretty logical sequence for the student that has no technical or computer science background. The other comment I'd make is that and I'd expand it from just high school to K through 12, I think one of the great needs is not just some basic cyber hygiene for them, but also a basic understanding not only of what they can do, but what they should and shouldn't do. So a basic cyber ethics, we think, needs to happen at the K through 12 level, and we're actually working cooperatively with the National Security Agency on developing something that would address that question, because I think, as we've heard from other speakers, this question of trust and moral boundaries, there's no version of a Hippocratic Oath in cybersecurity today, and we think there needs to be, and we think it needs to be understood in the K through 12 digital native population. Anyone else want to address this?
I'll jump in, actually, because I think this is great. We have a controversial panel at the end. So, but I completely disagree. I think that we desperately need computing to be taught and taught well in our high schools. If you think about the adversary, they're getting it early. They're not waiting to college. They are getting it very early, and we have to be competitive. So I would argue that we are in not so much a great state, and that we need to invest in putting folks that can teach CS-related courses in the high schools, and actually that will stay there. The problem is that once they get the expertise, then they get sucked up to Google and make 3 or 4 times as much money. And so I think that we are getting close, and I hate to use the word crisis, but I think it's something that we have to think about, is how do we invest in talent that have great degrees and expertise that can train our students in the 10th grade and the 9th grade when it comes to computing. When a student gets attacked, I ask them, what's your favorite programming language? So is it Ruby? Is it Python? Is it C? Oh, okay, why is that? Those are discussions that we're able to have. And I think that ultimately we need to move in that direction.
Anyone else? Ed?
My answer would be is that we have made a lot of progress outside the classroom with things like Cyber Patriot, Pico CTF, Cyber Start, and just integrating cyber into things like Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts, but that because of the zero-sum game, we are really struggling in the classroom. I would like to see it added because I think one of the ways that we increase the workforce is having more people think about majoring in computing disciplines and engineering disciplines. But I would only add that if it is taught poorly, I would prefer it not to be taught. You can do so much damage at the beginning, and we need to have our very most charismatic and inspiring people teaching first contact if possible. Maybe we should talk about CS1 some other day, too.
I think we'll finish on that note. Would you join me in thanking our panel?
Thank you.